I'm Abre Etteh, and I'm just really thankful that you've invited me here. And just to say that congratulations to ArchiNet for successfully gathering so many speakers for the network. And I hope that all these talks have been beneficial to everyone listening, and hopefully mine will also be beneficial to you. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm from Nigeria originally, and currently based in London. I'm an architect and an urban designer. I've been an architect for over 10 years, and I've got an MA degree in history and theory of architecture. And at the moment, I hold two positions. One is as a dissertation supervisor at Kingston University, which involves history and theory of architecture. So I'll just carry on then. So the talk today is basically about a project that I did in Detroit. It was a competition entry, and I was one of the winners of that competition. I completed the project in 2018. So basically, I'm going to give you a rundown of the history of the ideas, the actual sort of design, my approach, the build process, and then circling back to how the project kind of was used. Sukkot, I don't know if anyone's familiar with that term or that word. It's basically a festival that has very strong symbolic connections with the exodus of the ancient Israelites from Egypt. And it has very close connections to the agricultural festival. So it happens around the autumn time when farmers would bring in their crops and the produce of the land. And the ancient Jews were commanded to celebrate Sukkot by feasting for 7 days. So this is in the Torah. And of course, being a religious festival, there are lots of rituals involved in the celebration. And of course, Israel no longer has a temple, but some of those rituals are still practiced today. But there are a couple of others that are not, simply because there is no longer a temple. One of the rituals that continues today is waving the Lulav and the etrog, it's called. The etrog is the citrus fruit that you can see there on the screen. And the Lulav is the bunch of sort of green leaves that you see there as well. And then the priests would wave these items around in the mornings. So there's a 4 plant species. So you've got the etrog, the date palm, the myrtle, and the willow. And these 4 items are meant to symbolize unity, basically, the unity and diversity of the Jewish people. And the other thing that they would do every morning is they would recite from the Torah, word for word, Psalms 113 to 118. And those Psalms are called Hallel. Now, the word basically just means praise. And so these Psalms are said every day. So the Psalms are really all about praise and thanksgiving. And so this is where the name of my project comes from. And that's one of the main aspects of the project. So the 2 other rituals associated with Sukkot that are no longer practiced today, again, because there's no temple. The first is the water drawing ceremony and libation ceremony. So traditionally, what would have happened, say, 2,000 years ago, before the temple was destroyed, was that the priests would go down into a spring in Jerusalem, where they would every day draw water from that spring, and that would be brought to the temple with lots of celebrations, with people playing horns and dancing and singing, and then that water would be mixed with wine and then poured all over the altar. And the reason for doing this was just expressing Israel's hope for future rains and for abundant harvest. And this ceremony also has a significance beyond the Jewish world, also for Christians as well, because it was at the height of this ceremony that Jesus stood up and called himself the source of living water, and making a very strong connection between himself and the significance of the ceremony. And then the other ritual that was also practiced was the Illumination Ceremony. So here we had some giant candelabra which were erected in the temple, and each of them had several fronds to them with bowls which were filled with oil, and those were set alight. And now, because the temple was stood on top of a hill, this blaze of candles, the giant candles would cover the entire city, so people from miles around could see the light. And the light was just basically there to symbolize God's protection over the ancient Israelites as they wandered through the desert for the 40 years. And again, this ceremony, it also has a significance beyond the Jewish world, also for Christians. So again, in this same context, in Sukkot, Jesus called himself the light of the world, the same light that led the Israelites through the desert of Sinai. And then just lastly, the last ritual that people participate in, which is still done today, is is to build booths or temporary shelters, and these temporary shelters are called sukkah. So the idea was that in Moses' time, he wrote down in his commandments that people should sleep and eat in these temporary shelters for 7 days during the festival. And because they were temporary, the whole idea was that they would remind people of their ancestors' time in the desert, where they were very vulnerable, to the natural world, and remind them that God protected them during that time. Now, the Torah doesn't actually say exactly how to build a sukkah, but almost certainly these sukkahs were agricultural buildings, so they were almost certainly a makeshift kind of shelter that workers would have built to protect themselves from the sunlight, so just to keep themselves shaded. And sometimes during busier periods, it would be easier to just sleep in the fields than go back home. And so it's a very kind of minimal form of living. And as an architect, I find this quite interesting, because it's kind of thinking about stripping back a lot of programmatic requirements for living, and just thinking about what is the absolute minimum that we need for dwelling, what is the essential for living. There are lots of rules associated with how to build a sukkah, because these have evolved over time. I won't go through all of these rules. So this is kind of a schematic that just summarizes what these rules are. But there's lots of things like, it has to be a single-story building. It has to have at least 3 walls. The walls has to be at least 600 millimeters high. You can't build it underneath a tree, but you can build it on top of a tree. You can also build this on top of a camel if you wanted to. I don't know if many people do that. So there are lots of rules associated with building a sukkah, and even till today we see that going on. So people will build sukkahs in September, October time, on their balconies, in their backyards, and so on. So how does this ancient festival relate to a modern city? So this is the site for the project, Detroit in the US. Detroit has a dense urban core, very tall, sitting right next to the Detroit River, which you can see there almost in the center of the photograph. And it has sprawling suburbs, and they go on for miles and miles, with lots of open plots and green areas. And now Detroit is unique because it has some 1,300 urban farms, which I'll come back onto later on. And of course, the city was famous for the Ford company, where Henry Ford built the first really affordable family car, the Model T. And after sort of the 50s and 60s, the city declined economically, and so there are lots of scenes like this where you've got very derelict buildings with empty plots. But however, there has been a bit of a comeback in Detroit. Detroit was recently, a couple of years ago, named UNESCO City of Design. So it has a small but a vibrant arts and design community forming. And so this project that I did was part of the Month of Design in Detroit in 2018. So this is the site for the project. It's the triangular wedge that you can see on the screen. It's Capitol Park in downtown Detroit, surrounded by very, very tall buildings. And the sukkah that I designed sat on the edge of the green area you can see in the middle of the screen. And other kind of activities happened around the periphery of that site. And the site itself was regenerated not too long ago by a local businessman who he's bought up pretty much all the buildings surrounding that site and regenerated all of them as well as the actual park. Okay, so this was an image of what I proposed to be built, and I'll just go through some of the thinking behind the proposal. So the commission was put out by the Downtown Synagogue of Detroit, which was only a 2-minute walk from this park that you see here. And they asked people to design and build a modern-day sukkah to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. So it was an international competition, and the idea was that they would build 5 entries. And thankfully, my design was chosen, and it took a while to sort of digest a lot of the rules that are involved in building a sukkah. But my proposal revolved around 3 themes. And the first theme was the idea of a meeting place. For me, the kind of most essential form of a meeting place is just underneath a tree. And you see this in all cultures. People will go underneath a tree just to escape from the sun. And like I say, it's probably a very kind of a basic architectural, say, type. That cuts across cultures and different types of people, and it does invite meeting and community between people. The other theme was the idea. Well, the idea was community. So and I had in mind of how construction of building things can bring people together. So this is an image of an Amish barn raising, and the Amish people in America. Where they construct or build barns for different members of the community. So this event would attract, 50, 100 people helping out to build a barn for one person in the community. And I quite like the idea that architecture can be something that can bring people together in a communal act and actually sort of doing something. And my final theme, which is a bit more abstract, was Thanksgiving, because this festival is primarily about giving thanks. So I wanted this to feature somehow in the architecture, and I'll explain how that does in just a moment. This is a kind of a palette of materials for the sukkah. So the first is cedar to the left-hand side, then brass, some blue plywood, natural fibers, and then light. I submitted this 3D rendering, and you can see in the middle of the space right at the top some cedar shingles that hang from the ceiling, and these are blown by breezes, just like leaves on a tree. So that's where kind of the analogy comes in. And underneath that is a brass bowl that holds water, which acts as the heart of the space, something for people to gather around. And so this was kind of the design intent, that it was a meeting place, something that people can gather around, something that people can sit underneath. So I'll just talk a little bit about construction, because living in the UK and trying to design and build something in America was a bit of a challenge. And so what I tried to do was involve some CNC milling of the plywood, because I've got a little bit of experience with that. So I'll just mention a little bit of this. But before I actually jump onto that, just to say that I used blue plywood because in a lot of African cultures, blue is a color of celebration. So this is where I'm trying to bring back this idea that this festival is about celebration. And you can also see you might just about be able to see a light that's suspended over the bowl, which would which would be reflected off the surface of the water, and that would then illuminate the cedar shingles above. So I'll just jump on to a bit about the construction. So this is how it works. It's fairly straightforward. It's got 4 wall sections, one of them forming a doorway. They all then sit on a base plate with a ceiling joist above and a roof with timber shingles. And a bit of a closer look. So every wall panel is composed of a base plate and a top plate with the vertical members, and then plywood shingles sitting in between those vertical members. And two of these wall panels come together with an L-shaped connection piece on top, and they simply just have to be screwed together. And so that was the idea. That was the kind of very simple idea of how to put this together, which I then forwarded on to a builder in America who was also an architect, which is quite good. So the way it was built very straightforwardly was that every ply sheet was painted blue before cutting. Those then formed vertical members, and so what you see here is an MDF a piece that helps them to locate each of those ply shingles. So these vertical members and then get joined together into larger sections, forming the wall pieces. Great. So as I was saying, so being CNC milled, everything is very precise, and so it all just slots in slotted in very easily. And to top it all off, the roof is covered in these unfinished and unfixed pieces of timber. So that was the build, and so how this is the actual day. So the festival, like I mentioned, is 7 days long, and these flickers are all meant to kind of normally what they would function as is places for people to eat and sleep for 7 days. But these are public. These were meant to be public spaces for people to gather. Like I mentioned earlier, that Detroit has 1,300 urban farms, and so the market produce from these local farms are brought to the park during the week of the festival, and which was quite a vibrant sort of vibrant day. You know, every day really, just seeing all this produce from urban farms. And again, every single day, the Lulav and the etrog were waved around and prayers said. I especially was interested in sort of these little details that you got every so often. So light reflecting off of the bowl of water in the middle of the space, for instance. And every so often, when the light does catch at the right angle, the space can be kind of filled with light, even the ceiling, which might seem like it would have been heavy, but even still, even that gets sort of filled with light. And I was very glad about the way the ceiling worked out with these shingles, because the idea was that them being raw timber, raw cedar timbers, you cut them and you would get the smell of cedar perfuming the space. And every so often, when the right sort of breeze blew through the building, through the sukkah, you would get a nice sort of movement and sounds from the cedar shingles sort of bumping into each other, like we see here. So it then the space almost became sort of alive, because it was just sort of breathing and moving. So I was a little bit worried, let's say, about these cedar shingles, because the idea was that on the day or during the week, I would get members of the public to all come up, write a message of thanks on each one, and then those shingles would be hung on the ceiling. The reason why I was worried was because oftentimes when you ask the people the members of the public to write messages and whatever they want to write, you can imagine that you might get some rude messages, or messages that you wouldn't want. But to my surprise, we got some really lovely messages. There were some 200 cedar shingles that were cut, and about 180 of them had messages on them, like this one, and talking, people thanking, family members, thanking the people who had hosted this event, and it was actually quite uplifting to see so many messages. And in the end, the ceiling actually became the center point of this sukkah, because I was always expecting it to be the brass bowl filled with water, but the thing, but children still were, I think, more fascinated by the bowl filled with water than they were by the ceiling. I especially like this photograph just because this child contrasts so well with the building. So this is the sukkah in context. As you can see, it's a very, very tall city. And lastly, just a view of the sukkah at night. And again, so you can sort of see the elements here where we've got the cedar shingles at the top, which again sway in the breeze and perfume the space. And then there's a light that drops down from the ceiling, which lights up that bowl in the middle, the brass bowl. The brass bowl reflects the light up onto the ceiling. And then we have this woven mat, which is a reference to the urban farms and the fact that the festival of Sukkot is an agricultural festival at its heart. And then obviously then there's some messages on the cedar shingles, which are all about Thanksgiving, that being a key element of this festival. And again, the blue, which is not necessarily a Jewish sort of custom or symbol, but it does represent this idea of celebration, which is pretty much what this whole project is about. And just to say that there is a book that I've published recently on this building. The book is mostly sort of theological reflections on the Psalms. So I mentioned Hallel, those Psalms from which kind of inspired this building. So there's some reflections on those, and it is available on Amazon. The book also includes images, some of which you've seen here today, and it includes some sort of detailed drawings as well. And basically, what I kind of want to leave you with is just some thoughts that are still going through my mind, especially sort of thinking about living. So one thing that amazed me was the fact that this structure, the sukkah, the building knowledge has been transferred from one generation to the next for several thousand years now. And my thinking is that how do we do that? How do we transfer knowledge to a new generation, so that things are, and what we transfer is just beyond mere style. So like I showed you earlier on, a huge list of rules surrounding the sukkah. And how do we transfer something that is easy to communicate to anyone? Now, the other thing that I'm also still thinking about is how can our dwellings be simpler? How can they connect us to something more essential, something bigger than ourselves? So these are kind of themes that are still running through my mind and running through some of the work that I've been doing recently. And so I'm hoping to kind of carry on with that. And I'm also hoping that if there are people out there interested in the same sorts of ideas, the same themes, that we can connect and perhaps carry on some of these sorts of discussions. So I hope that all of this has been useful. It's a bit of a shorter talk probably than what you're used to, but I'm more than happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Abre. We will, if anyone have questions, please send it now.
Yeah, just to add actually to this, there were 4 other sukkahs that were built, and all of them had to be deconstructed at the end of the festival. But you can hopefully, if anyone is going to Detroit in September time, October time, you will be able to see this, because the organizers have decided to keep the sukkah. So every year they will reconstruct the sukkah. So if you are in Detroit around that time, you can probably pop by to Capitol Park and have a look at it for yourself.
So we can find that book online?
Yes, the book's available on Amazon. If you do a search for my name, Abre Etteh, A-B-R-E, E-T-T-E-H, you should be able to find that. It should be fairly straightforward to find it. It's available as a paperback and also as a Kindle, the book.
Okay, so we are waiting if anyone have questions, or we can wrap up with it.
I think someone has raised.
Yeah, let's Loai.
Yes, hi. My question is that what did the judgment committee like most in your design concept that made you win the competition? Is it the forms, the color, the ceiling, the smell, the shadows, lighting?
Yeah, so it was quite good because we did get feedback on this, and what they said was that they especially liked that it was multi-sensory, because oftentimes as architects it's very easy to focus on the visuals and focus on the form and proportions, which obviously are important, but there are other things that like just where exactly the building is positioned on site, because I position this towards facing the prevailing wind. So the door into the sukkah faced the prevailing wind. And so that's I knew that on days where the wind was stronger, it would actually sort of blow through and cause the ceiling to move. So they really liked the fact that it was multi-sensory. And so I suppose in many ways that helped them to kind of understand and visualize, and imagine how the space would be even before it was built.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we don't have any written questions so far. So if anyone have voice questions, we can go with it, or we can just wrap up. I already shared the book link in the chat.
Okay, great.
So it's about $3, I think, but for the Kindle version.
Yeah, I wanted to give it away for free, but Amazon won't let me.
Yes.
Jeff Bezos has to make money. So.
They have to. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, I think we can wrap up since no one have questions or have raising hands. Thank you, Abre, again for your time and for sharing this presentation, and hope to see you soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.